Cool. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Um, this is actually quite an exciting session, not only because Michael and I are being so silly, but also because this is our first webinar with ProQuo AI, who are our first ever Copy Club partners. Um, so for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to give you the 2 minutes on what the Copy Club is. We've got loads of old faces here, so actually maybe I don't need to do this. We're a community for marketers in fast growth organizations, and we exist to make your lives easier. I founded it now many moons ago because I moved from big business to small business and found the transition really lonely and really hard. And in small businesses, have found it really difficult to work out what the right tools are and how to just hack stuff that felt hard and like unnecessarily hard. I just felt like there had to be a better way. ProQuo AI have a very similar mission. So they are tech designed to help challenger brands get access to the information they need to drive growth. And that's what you're going to see, like not actually see what they do today, but see their thinking, like the kind of strategic thinking that they've done with like incredible rigor and applied to big businesses and small businesses, and use that to inform the product they've built. I'm going to hand over to Michael. The idea for this is that there's a lot that they want to talk to and I talk about, and I know it's going to be super rich. So they're going to talk for about 50 minutes. Then we'll have a Q&A if there are questions. If you've got questions throughout, chuck them in the chat. If you've got questions at the end, come off mute and heckle. And then if there's questions that happen after the session, the WhatsApp group will be open and we can pick things up by email, loads and loads of different ways to pick things up. What I would love you all to do in the first 2 minutes, as we get going, is to put in the chat one thing you need help with. And this doesn't need to be about this session. This is just in general, in your life. I mean, maybe professional, but also personal stuff. We can take that too, that you need help with, because we exist to make your lives easier. And a lot of the value we can add is by making connections between you. And I think I just really want to encourage this idea that like all of us are struggling with difficult things. So Michael and I actually were just chatting about what I need help with at the moment, which is that everyone is still in holiday mode, and we're finding it really hard to get people to turn up to events. So you guys are all heroes. But what my ask is that I'd love your thoughts and feelings on how you feel about kind of online, offline. Do you want more training, less training, and how that's evolving as we kind of come out of this Corona madness? But put yours in the chat, one thing you all need help with. And then I'll hand over to Michael, who'll take things from here.
Thanks, Lottie. And thanks to everyone for joining today. It's incredible to have you guys with us. We'll introduce ourselves in just a second. Obviously, you guys probably know why you're here. Today, we're talking about how to build an unforgettable brand and the link that has to helping you achieve organic brand awareness. My name is Michael Coden, and I'm joined by Danny, DJ, Jennings, who's our product director at ProQuo. My background is quite similar actually to Lottie's in terms of like my career trajectory, being a big business kind of born and bred. I started at Unilever in 2009 and worked there for about 10 years across the US and the UK businesses, and spent a bit of time in Australia working in like their brand development and brand building parts of their organization, primarily within personal care, and joined ProQuo, which is a brand management platform that is aiming to help whatever your brand, big to small brands, challenger brands, grow. And what we want to enable every single brand manager with is the opportunity to get a really clear understanding of how their brand's performing in the marketplace, and actionable brand guidance to ensure that the decisions that they make the most impact on their brand and the competitive environment that we're in at the moment. Danny, do you want to introduce yourself to the guys here today?
Yes, please. Hello, everybody. And yeah, thank you again for joining. I'm Danny Jennings. I'm the product director at ProQuo. And I've spent the last 8 years really working with brands of all different shapes and sizes on their customer experience and for them to become as memorable as possible. So I used to be the lead product manager at EY's Advanced Tech Group, which is a snazzy name. I helped brands in there from kind of everything from ING with the bank with their digital banking experience, and think people like BT and Vodafone, for example, right down to really small brands. And I think probably the weirdest experience I've worked with so far and helped to make memorable was we were creating an app for a kind of car rental and ownership service where cars drive themselves and they're autonomous. So what does an experience look like when you buy a car that you might not necessarily own all of and you need to kind of rent it out? So yeah, that's me. I'm now director of product at ProQuo. And what that means is it's my job to make the vast majority of our customer interactions and our brand experience satisfying but completely forgettable. Sounds weird, bear with me. It's also my job to make a few very strategic moments very special and very memorable, and for people to talk to other people about our brand using those special moments. So a bit more on that later.
Thanks, Danny. So what's in store today? We're going to cover quickly what is brand memorability, but we're going to spend the majority of the time on taking you guys through kind of the end-to-end consumer journey and a theory called the forgettable zone of tolerance, which we use to kind of think about brand experiences and where you can create surprisingly memorable moments to kind of differentiate yourself in market. We'll give a few examples of some killer consumer journeys that are really doing that well to help inspire you. We'll take your questions at the end, and we'll leave you with kind of ways that you can consider how to build memorable moments into your own kind of brand and your own consumer journey. How does that sound? If everyone's off mute, yes, thumbs up, cool. We mentioned who we are, but just very briefly, we're a brand management platform that helps challenger brands grow. So every day our platform speaks to people about your brand and your competitive set, whoever it is that you're interested in getting data on. Our platform gathers that for you and it interprets it for you to help you understand what actions should you be taking in market to grow and what actions could you be taking that would have the most positive reactions on your brand strength. We're called ProQuo because we measure the relationship that's exchanged between people and brands. And what's cool about today is that the relationship that people have with brands is very similar to, it's almost interchangeable with the experience that they have with your brand. And so today is all about how to build killer brand experiences that will make your brand one that people will remember and that will grip within people's minds. We've got 60 brands on our platform. A lot of them are kind of Copy Club alum. So the guys like Pippin Nut and Tony's and those that you see kind of on the screen and more across the US and the UK. So if you'd like to have a conversation following this, we are all ears. We have seen that kind of today, there are some people who have signed up who are current customers. And so we built a website that's called proquoai.com/upgrades, which is giving current customers a free custom question. So if you are a customer on the webinar today, know that that's yours. The promo code that we've built into the form is just the first 3 letters of your first and last names, not case sensitive. And then because we're partners with the Copy Club, we've also built a Get Started page. So if you're new to us and you'd like to join and find out what people are kind of feeling about you and two or more of your competitors, we're offering all the Copy Club brands free prompted and unprompted brand awareness tracking. And at today's webinar, we can also give 50% off the first month for anyone that's keen on having a chat. So either visit that website, we'll keep it live through the webinar, or just drop a comment into the chat, and Danny and I are happy to pick that up after today's presentation. So why don't we get into it? What is brand memorability? I mean, there are brands that you can close your eyes and think about. A brand that comes to my mind that in the soft drinks category is something that you just immediately can recall and remember is Coca-Cola. You can think of Always, you can think of the scripting text, you can think of the polar bears. I hope that aired in the UK, it was big in the US, that they used in Christmas time, kind of in the early 2000s and late 90s. And you can also kind of visualize the silhouette of the Coca-Cola packaging bottle. And what makes you think of Coke as a brand first is that they've really built into the foundation of their brand's DNA, really consistent and really authentic cues that trigger your memory. And we'll go into how they've done that. But what brand memorability is at the simplest is it's simple triggers that bring people, that grip in people's mind and bring them back to remembering, okay, I've seen that brand somewhere, they've said something, and that's achieved with long-term consistency throughout the end-to-end consumer journey. It can often be kind of put head to head with brand awareness. When you think about how memorable a brand is, you often then say, well, what's the awareness that that brand has in the marketplace, but they are quite different things. And so I just wanted to tease them apart before we dive into what makes a brand memorable. So when we're talking about brand awareness really is the percentage of people that have heard of your brand. So it can be gathered at a prompted level, which is we show a logo and we say, you know, within tonic waters, how many people have heard of the brand Fever Tree? Yes, I have. You know, or it can be an unprompted level of awareness, which is when thinking about tonic waters, name all of the tonic waters you can think of, and then someone will more spontaneously say Schweppes. It's often linked to household penetration. So there's been studies and research that has suggested that brands that are more salient, brands that are more on the tip of everyone's tongue, brands that are more top of mind are the ones that people reach for and grab off of shelves more often. And it's ironically often something that can be bought, which I think is such a relevant, probably the most relevant point for today, is that you can buy brand awareness, but you can't buy brand memorability. So you can buy a campaign that allows you to reach 1 million people and you can throw tons of money into it. But what often happens is that the minute that you turn the taps off your media spend, your saliency, your awareness starts to decline. If your brand's memorable, what you'll notice is that when you invest in your brand awareness holds. And that's what you want. And we'll talk about brands that are achieving that today. It's not the end all answer though for challenger brands who are scaling brand awareness. A lot of people think brand awareness is the best thing, but it is if you've built your brand in a memorable way. So what's the key difference, therefore, between brand memorability and brand awareness? We know what brand awareness is. It's recall, aided and unaided recall about a brand. But brand memorability is really the thing that will supercharge your brand awareness. It's the thing that's going to allow your brand awareness to hold when your media is turned off. It's going to be that thing that grips people in their end-to-end path to purchase. So memorability is your brand's grip. And for more cost-effective brand awareness, it really comes from weaving memorable moments in from the start and nurturing them over time in what we call the end-to-end consumer journey. So it doesn't require flashy budgets. It doesn't require studio settings. To create a memorable brand, it's really about thinking about what does your brand stand for, and in its core DNA, building in structures which will make people, amongst all the other brands out there, recall it. So let's dive into the different steps in the consumer journey. There's a couple different ways that you can look at a consumer journey. Everyone's heard about omni-channel. It's that diagram that looks like a plate of spaghetti where, like, you know, people go all around, in and out. You know, it's not a linear path to purchase. You've all heard that before. Here I'm giving you a linear model for ease of the 50 minutes that we have together. So I'm really simplifying it down for us today. But the consumer journey has really 6 big stages within it. There are things like awareness, consideration, pre-usage, usage, post-usage, and what we call retirement. And we'll go into what the definitions of each of those stages are and what the actual experiences are with your brand in each of those phases. The first is awareness. So when you're thinking about the awareness of your brand, it is essentially defined as, you know, the customer has their first interaction with your brand. It might be their first interaction ever. It could be their first interaction in a couple of years. It could be their first interaction since their last purchase, really. It is a bit cyclic as we get to the end with retirement. And the experiences that people will have with an awareness are heavily driven through the ads that they experience from you. You know, if you have an always on paid social media approach, a lot of times, if you're a service provider and you're investing in search, PPC will play a role there. And then, of course, you know, word of mouth. The second stage is consideration. And consideration is really all about, you know, the customer kind of thinks about your brand, and it's at arm's reach, essentially. So they're on your website, they're kind of looking into it. They might be searching out some ratings and reviews of your product and thinking through whether or not it's for them. They might be kind of stalking you on Instagram or e-commerce, different e-commerce sites with Shopify and this, that, and the other. Or they might even be in store, ready and willing to purchase you. Pre-usage is when a customer actually receives the product and prepares to use your brand. So this can be things like if you're a D2C brand, and you have a product that's delivered to your door. My birthday was on Sunday, and my friend sent me a 48 pack of Brewdog. They know me too well, and the outer packaging that it was delivered in was amazing. You know, it was a really, really cool, memorable experience in how it was delivered. But also the unboxing experience and the preparation to usage is what we'll talk about when we go into the pre-usage experience. Usage is quite obvious. You know, the person is using the product from the first time all the way through the time that the product is empty. And that will be kind of us looking at the experiences that people have with your brand around opening your product and reopening it, using and reusing your product, and the actual taste and the consumption of that product, you know, the physical usage of it. Nearly there on post usage is the moment when the customer kind of completes the final consumption. So we'll look at things like the recyclability of the packaging and its environmental impact and how that product gets disposed. And finally, the loop back to the front, which is the time before the customer buys the product again. So they might leave a feedback on the .com or the social platform of the brand that they've used. A brand manager might be targeting them again with digital ads to try and get them to come back and purchase a second or third time. And essentially, in the brand management world, it's really about nurturing the consumer towards a second purchase. Danny, I'm going to hand it over to you to get into the meat and bones of the theory behind brand experiences. And it's something that we call the forgettable zone of tolerance.
Indeed. Thank you, Michael. Right. So before we dive too heavily into this, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the theory of the FZT, as Michael calls it, and how you actually would use that and apply that theory. But then we'll very quickly get into the practicalities of that, so the do's, don'ts, and pitfalls if you did want to use something like this. And then finally, we'll back some of that up with some brand examples. So we picked a couple of different products and we've observed their experiences on the FZT to see kind of where there might be areas for disruption in their category, for example. Can you skip the slide? Thank you. Right. So what is the forgettable zone tolerance? In our view, this is one half of a toolkit that a brand manager, marketeer, anybody that's really involved across that consumer journey, really within a business, and they can use this theory to look across that full end-to-end experience, and they can use it to identify what parts of that experience might be liable for disruption. So how can you really turn your category on its head and become a really memorable brand? And you can also use it to see where you potentially might be falling behind and where there might be holes in the value chain of your end-to-end experience. I think if there's one message that I want everybody to take away from this session, it will be that not all of the parts of your experience have to be memorable. In fact, they must not all be memorable. If every single interaction that your customer has with your brand feels completely different and surprising and novel, then it will mean one of two things normally. Either your brand will be taken as a gimmick, or it will feel so alien that people don't really want to use it. So when we talk about kind of the FCT and how the three reasons why I think that this is such a cool theory, particularly for kind of this audience, is number one, because this is universal. It means it can be applied to basically any product or service category in the world. The second one is it really forces everybody cross-functionally within a company to look at your end-to-end experience. So you could be absolutely killing it on your awareness, and you can also be killing it on your usage. But if you're really falling behind on that pre or post-usage experience, and that people expect something in the category and you're falling behind in that, it will mean that your experience is either not as memorable as you want it to be, or it's memorable for the wrong reasons. So that's kind of the second piece. And then the third piece is that this is ultimately accessible to everybody. You don't need millions and millions of pounds to effectively disrupt a category using a theory like this. So how do we use it? What you would normally do is you would take that end-to-end consumer journey that Michael's just talked us through, and you'd map out every single customer interaction or every single interaction that a customer has with your brand. So if you are if you're a D2C technology product, you could do this. If you're a kind of a food and bev product that is listed in the supermarket, you can also do this. Your stages might look slightly different, but the idea is that you should track the individual interactions, and then you should categorize each of those interactions on a spectrum that has 3 different buckets in it. the three different buckets that we'll talk through now are, you have this big chunky bucket in the middle called the forgettable zone of tolerance. And then you have two slightly smaller buckets at either end of that spectrum that are either surprisingly memorable or disappointingly memorable. So what we can start to talk about now is, MC, if you want to just jump back to what's in the zone of tolerance, I think it's 2 slides. What we can start to talk about now is exactly what the types of things that you would normally see in these. So when we talk about kind of a good brand, what we're talking about is a brand that's achieving memorability in the way that they need to in order to grow in the way they'd like. So 90% of a brand's interactions, we would normally expect to sit in this forgettable zone of tolerance. So for example, how many of you on this call are going to get off this call and talk to your friends about how great the experience was logging into Zoom? Absolutely nobody, I would suggest. It might be the other way around. You might say I'm sick of Zoom calls, but that's a slightly different topic. Another example is, how many people would speak to a friend about how cool it was to throw a Coke bottle in the bin? These are parts of the experience that Zoom and Coke have looked at and said, you know what, we are going to achieve a level of satisfaction where people aren't going to complain and it's not going to surprise them or make them feel anxious. But we're also not going to major on that. We're not going to try and be different. We're not going to try and be cool. And actually, we're going to plop it straight in the middle of that forgettable zone of tolerance. So that's an example. What comes outside of that then, if you want to jump there, Michael, is surprisingly memorable. So 10% of the interactions that a customer should have with your brand, if you want it to be really memorable, should sit in this area. So these are interactions that a customer would have within the category. They would expect one thing, and with your brand, they're going to get something that's going to blow them out of the water. And that can be across the customer experience. So whether that's at the kind of consideration level. So if you're listed in a supermarket, what is it in a supermarket that's going to really stand you out? Is it at the pre-usage where actually it's the journey home and opening the box is the thing that people are going to feel really special? It's about targeting those specific areas where you could make people feel happy, surprised. And the idea is that this is really the area that you need to have a strong purpose on exactly why you want your brand to be remembered. So if you're doing a really great job and somebody talks to a friend about why they should use your product, it's more than likely that they are going to mention these things in this area if you get it right. So they're novel, different interactions, and this is the area that you can use to kind of disrupt the category. So if you map category expectation along this line, it's worth noting that each different part of this customer experience will be different for a category. So you might get a much higher expectation at awareness and usage, and a really low expectation at retirement, for example. So it's really important that you understand and have the finger on the pulse around what people expect about their consumption journey in your category. And then then what's outside the FCT is disappointingly memorable moments, which I actually think might even be more important when a brand is really first starting out and using this theory. So if there are parts in your experience that you know are slightly underwhelming, or even worse, kind of invoke these scary three, which are confusion, anxiety, and frustration, it will mean that your brand begins to be remembered for the wrong reasons. So for example, if we go back to Zoom, if Zoom had a shocker and you could never get into any meetings or your camera could never come on, these are things that you would remember about Zoom. And that if somebody said to you, how's Zoom? You'd say, well, yeah, it's kind of good, but actually I can never really log in, or my camera's not working. And I can give you some more examples when we actually run through the when we through the kind of brand end-to-end stuff. But the idea is that a good brand would want 0% of their customer interactions in this part of the spectrum. And when it comes to kind of balancing stuff, a bad interaction would stay in somebody's head a lot longer than a good one. So if you spend loads and loads of time raising a couple of your interactions above the line and making sure that they are kind of surprisingly memorable and delightful, but you have one or two that actually sit below the line, it will mean that your brand has still got a mixed view, and that often it will even be negative. So it's really important that you kind of look at these outside areas and that you prioritize trying to get the disappointing pieces up. So that's the theory. So if you map all of your interactions end to end, the do's and the don'ts for me are, the first one is that you need to invest in understanding category expectation. And by investment, I don't just mean money. It's about really, really getting to grips with who your main competitors are, how consumers are experiencing their brands, and what it is that's expected within the category. The second one is then prioritizing those few moments. So as I said right at the start, if you prioritize every moment, firstly, that is unbelievably resource inefficient in that everything will start like kind of slowly go up that spectrum. Nothing will get really sparkly really quickly, and it'll take a long time for your brand to get there. But it will also mean that it becomes a bit of a gimmick, or it just feels really alien, and people don't like alien. The third one is de-risking bets by testing concepts. So it's a really, really dangerous thing for any product or service to assume that they understand what a customer wants and what's going to delight them. So by testing concepts in a really kind of low cost, almost guerrilla way, we always really encourage. And then finally, it's about having the clear vision about how you want to be different. So looking back to those key strategic moments, if you're only going to pick a few, where are you going to pick it on the journey, which is what the FCT is. And then the second half of that toolkit, Michael will talk about shortly, which is how you then do that. But you really need to have a clear vision for exactly what it is you want your brand to be remembered for. If we go through the don'ts then, it's about ignoring the weaknesses in your experience. Do not look at your experience and say, right, let's go after the two we want to be really sparkly and let's ignore the stuff that actually people are going to be disappointed by. The second one is about marginally improving moments. I think this might be the biggest kind of setback or most obvious thing that normally happens with big brands that I think small brands can really use to disrupt them, which is marginally improving stuff. So we talk about this spectrum. If you spend loads and loads of time taking one of the interactions in your experience from acceptable but not memorable to kind of okay but still not memorable, so if you move it just upwards in the forgettable zone of tolerance, it's a complete waste of time because somebody's still not going to remember your brand for it. You're going to have spent loads of resource on it, and it won't have any effect on your brand memorability. What you need to do is when you target an interaction, you really need to try and move the dial and be significant on it. So there's no point moving things within the same zone. If something's in the forgettable zone of tolerance and you really do think that people are satisfied, then you should leave it there unless you're trying to be strategic and really make it memorable. Which talks about the kind of the third one, which is don't go after every moment. And finally, I could not stress this enough, which is do not assume that you understand what delightful or novel means for customers. It might be the most left field wacky idea that really means that your brand starts to click and people really start to remember that moment. So I wouldn't take anything off the table in terms of wackiness, but just make sure you go far enough, I guess would be the pitfall there. Let's have a look at some examples then of some killer consumer journeys, or actually I think we've got a good and a bad. This one is, I think it's almost unfair to present this one because Apple are now a $2 trillion market cap, so I think they've got some money to spend. But I mean, the way that they've got there is through design and experience. So there are lots of things about the Apple experience that you could probably recall because they're such a well-known brand. But actually, the way that they've really got there in the two areas, if they were to have majored on any, are probably consideration and pre-usage. So Apple spend an inordinate amount of money on kind of retail space and their stores and how big their stores are on that store experience. It's very, very different to almost any other brand in the world in the way that you would consider an Apple product, from the kind of geniuses that they have in there to the packaging to the way that you can try things out. And actually other brands are now kind of starting to, particularly electrical goods brands, they're starting to mimic that. But nobody still really does it quite as good as Apple. And then the pre-usage piece, and where they have really taken kind of design and customer experience to the next level here, is when you unbox an Apple product, you know you're unboxing it. Like, I'm sure maybe we've got some kind of some Android supporters on the call, and fair enough. But if you've ever unboxed an Apple product, you know exactly what it's going to be like before you do it, and it's still special every time. So you unbox it, it's layered in a beautiful way, it's seamless, the lid closes slowly. None of these things are like absurdly complicated or require millions and millions of pounds to do, but they've really, really honed in on that pre-usage first opening experience. If anybody's opened a HP laptop in the last 10 years, you will probably understand what I mean, because a HP laptop will be in that forgettable zone of tolerance, which means it's perfectly acceptable. It wasn't impossible to get into. They didn't cut your hands or anything on the way out, but it's a kind of brown cardboard box that's built for efficiency. You've got your charger and your laptop, and it's all good. And it's all in kind of white cellophane. Apple's very, very different. So here's a bit of an example of where they've kind of prioritized a special few moments. Because Apple have got so much money and their brand is so heavy into design, you in general, a lot of their interactions will be kind of towards the top line, but I still believe out of the lot that these two are probably the most memorable. So that's example one. How long we got left, Michael? What's the time looking like? 33.
You've got, yeah, 25 minutes.
Okay, so I reckon we could probably do this one as well. So this is a bad example for a food product. I'm not going to attribute any particular brand to this, but this could be like a classic pitfall, which is in your usage, it's not just about the taste of your product, it's all the other things around the kind of repeated use of it, right? So if your packaging is too small or too big, if the product that they're consuming runs out too quickly, if it's too big to fit in the cupboards. So for example, if a milk carton was too thick and you couldn't put it in the door of your fridge, that would start to get a bit annoying. And it's about looking at the kind of micro interactions a customer would have all the time in that. And in the post-usage piece, I think particularly with kind of consumable or perishable goods, the whole non-recycling thing is a bit of a no-no now. I think everybody on this is far more of an expert on this than me. But if somebody, when they are disposing of your product, feels like they've wasted anything in any way, or if it feels like they're damaging the environment by consuming it, that will not be a good thing. So it's an example of kind of two interactions that could be in the disappointingly memorable piece. And then finally, we've got a mixed end-to-end experience, which actually is probably more common than you think. So I think it's quite natural for people to find these special moments in a product, and otherwise products wouldn't exist. But it's a little bit harder to spot when it's performing under expectation. And an example of a D2C product here, and actually it's a bit of I always get a bit excited talking about this, so I won't do it for too long. But Amazon have focused on a customer experience and been so revolutionary in the way that people shop that they have actually changed the pre-usage experience and the expectation of a customer for nearly every single brand on the planet that's D2C. And that's because they introduced Amazon Prime, and it meant that there was no anxiety, there was no frustration, and there was no confusion about exactly where the products were that you were buying. So you consider something, you buy it, and with Amazon, you know exactly where it is in every single stop until it reaches your door. And normally it's quicker than most other places. So what that means for brands that aren't shipping through Amazon, but that are D2C, is that you still need to provide that transparency to people. I bought a pair of shorts from the States during lockdown, which was a silly idea because of the shipping stuff, but they didn't tell me where those were. I had to wait for 6 weeks for them to get here. I had no idea where they were stuck. I had to speak to the customer success team there to figure out where they were. They didn't really know. And there was so much anxiety that was built there. Even though the shorts are amazing, I probably won't buy from them again because I was so anxious about the fact they got lost in the post and I didn't know where they were. So it's really, really important that you kind of, firstly, it's really important you're honest with yourself. So there's no point lying to yourself if you to do this mapping exercise. If there is a place in your experience that you think is disappointingly memorable, it's really important you target that first and push it up to the FCT as a priority. So that's kind of the third one. I think what we should probably do now is hand over to Michael to talk about the second part of that toolkit. With the FCT, we've talked about where, and now we'll talk about how.
Cool. Thanks, Danny. So how to build memorable brand moments into your consumer journey. We're going to talk a little bit about data and the science behind memorability. Some of you will be familiar with this, which is called System 1 and System 2. System 1 is your instinctual kind of gut feeling on something. It's a subconscious reaction that you can't fake. It's just an instinct. It happens between 250 and 850 milliseconds of time. So it's something that's extremely fast. It's something that's extremely automatic. It's something that's extremely intuitive. And 95% of the things that we experience daily are in that System 1 gut feel. So if I said to you, our Mercedes-Benz car is expensive, it's that thing that hits you in your stomach that we've all just felt before you answer the question. That is what System 1's all about. It's this idea of a feeling state. So in your brain, you first feel something, then you consciously think about something, and that's what System 2 is about. So 5% of what we kind of experience is in a conscious state, which is a lot slower. It's considered, it's kind of deliberate and rule governed. So if I felt Mercedes-Benz cars are expensive in my System 1, I would then consciously articulate why that's the case. And there's a lot of experiences with brands where the System 1 does not necessarily line up to the System 2. The most common example is people will often say that they buy ecological products and that sustainability is the number one important thing to them. But when you look at the System 1 response of people, actually, it's other things that they care about most first. So what we look at kind of behind memorability is both people's feelings about your brand experience, but also their thoughts. And what becomes most important are these feelings, that 95% system one subconscious state. So how can a brand be surprisingly memorable? At ProQuo, we use a framework which is called the 16 drivers of brand relationships. I mentioned at the start that our name is ProQuo because we believe that people stay in relationships so long as they get out from them more than they put into them. So they have this positive quid pro quo relationship. And that's the same whether you think about the relationships that you have with your friends as it is to the relationships that you have with brands. And so what we've done over the last 8 years is we've looked at, over 600 brands in over 60 different markets, and we distilled the relationships that's exchanged between brands and people down to these 16 things. And it's these 16 things that you can choose from in your surprisingly memorable moments within your end-to-end consumer experience that allows you to kind of actively major and create things that are going to grip into people's minds. So some of you will have seen these before, but for those who are new, I'm just going to take a second to define what they are so that we're all on the same page. So the drivers on the left, attraction, are, we can look at how physically appealing is your product or service at shelf when people experience it. Its empathy is, how well do people feel that your brand is meeting shopper needs? Aspiration is something like how special do people feel your product is to them? Innovation is how thought leading does your brand feel? Clarity, it talks to kind of, do people understand the role of your brand in their lives? Is this something that I use during the morning or at night? Or, Red Bull's a really great example of clarity. People know it gives them wings, it energizes them. So that product's role is really clear. Relevance is whether or not the brand's, service or benefit is kind of hitting home to you as a shopper. Performance is whether or not the brand serves its core purpose. So does it taste great? In the example of Fever Tree, does it have a long-lasting fragrance? In the case of a Lynx body spray, who would know? Differentiation, for example, is how unique the product is within the marketplace. The level of connection that a brand has with people. Do you relate to the way that the brand behaves when you see it in market? The level of integrity that the brand holds. So do you trust it? Is it something that you think always that the company, behaves in the right way when they're faced with a choice? Equally, do they come across as being an open and an honest brand that's really transparent? Are they one that kind of have a sense of buzz and popularity about them? Are they a brand that's easy to use and easy to get a hold of? Do they behave consistently, within all of their different marketing touch points? Are they worth paying for? So this is kind of your cost quality equation. And do you feel familiar with the brand, which is different than awareness? It's really about a sense of like whether or not you feel that you know a thing or two about the brand. So the idea within the end-to-end consumer journey is to figure out where you're currently positioned to improve your disappointingly memorable moments into the forgettable zone of tolerance, but to choose and figure out where are the white space opportunities for your brand within the competitive set to major on a moment within the end-to-end journey with one of these 16 drivers that's really going to not only maximize the experience, but maximize the relationship that your brand has with people. Danny, do you want to talk us through Simba Sleep? We've got a couple examples here for you.
Yes, I do. I should have probably marketed myself as first and foremost a Simba Sleep fanboy, and secondly as director of product for ProQuo. I'm a big fan of this brand. So we've got a couple of case studies now that we're going to bring up, and we're going to overlay the how onto the where. But each of these, in my view, and in our view, are challenger brands. And what we think they are doing, what we've mapped on here is what we believe they are doing to the category. So if you look at the category before and after these brands have entered it, this is where we believe their kind of their forgettable zone of tolerance is, and where they've decided to prioritize in the end-to-end journey. So if we look at Simba, if people don't know Simba on the phone, they're a kind of a mattress company, but they also specialize in things like pillows. If you look at the category before Simba came along, and the kind of cohort of mattress companies that have come out in their wake as well, the normal experience about buying a mattress is that you would go to a shop and you would probably lie on a mattress that everybody else has also lied on and say, I either do or do not like this mattress. And then you decide to buy it in store, and it would take however long it would take to come. And then you'd either need two people to come in and help you put your mattress onto your bed, or you would struggle to get it up the stairs yourself and bend it around the corners and get it on the bed. So that experience was tough but necessary because people can't sleep on the floor. What Simba have done is they've really attacked those areas that I just talked about. So in the consideration period, Simba are firstly, they're D2C and they're mainly digital through their channels, which means you now get to look at a mattress from the comfort of your home. They realize that actually it's not quite the same as lying on it, so they've gone very strong and they've gone very innovative with their value proposition. So firstly, they provide a 100 night sleep guarantee where you can just send the mattress back for free. All good. But what they've also done in their website is they've gone so hard on the science. This particular journey was for the pillows. And one of the things they talk about their pillows is that it's made in the same fabric as spacesuits with astronauts. So they're going really, really hard on innovation in this consideration period. Then comes the pre-usage, which I think is probably the most disruptive and special about their experience, which is instead of having two people come into your house, you just get a box to your door and you bring it into your apartment. Granted, it's still quite heavy, but it can fit through every door. And you take it downstairs to your bedroom, you open the box, and the mattress kind of unrolls itself. And then as air comes into it, it then comes to full size, which means there is absolutely no pain whatsoever in the pre-usage experience anymore in the mattress category. And then finally, the performance, the usage is just insane. They've majored on this so hard. You don't need to flip mattresses from Simba anymore. They've got this crazy technology that is the hybrid between memory foam and springs, and it means that your mattress never loses form. They've gone so hard into that stuff, and we think they've really heavily disrupted the category, primarily for these reasons. Of the three, I would suggest it's a pre-usage that they targeted first, and they've really, really hit that hard. And I think they're now kind of sharing the spoils of the mattress category because of it. So that's Simba. The second one that we wanted to talk about was Harry's. So different category now. It's both D2C and it's in store, and they're a shaving brand. If people don't know, they're like a men's grooming products piece, and I would say that their staple or their kind of core product offering is these very bright coloured razors. I'm not sure if anybody's seen the out of home or anything like that. We believe that Harry's have really also prioritised the kind of consideration and pre-usage piece, but it has to be said about their awareness too. I actually, as recently as last night, stood on a tube and saw a 20-meter long bright orange razor that was like poking into my consciousness that I still remember now. So if you looked at the category before Harry's entered it, it's mainly dominated by brands like Gillette. And if you look at a brand like Gillette, the way that they have kind of positioned themselves and what they're memorable for is all about performance, really. So even all of the ads that Gillette ever run have sports stars in them. It's all about pinnacle peak performance with a trifecta of multi-blade razors that have never ever shaved closer to the skin and all that kind of stuff, right? That's what Gillette's about. Harry's decided to take a very different kind of quadrant of the 16 drivers, and they've gone all about attraction. So for them, it's about being different and attractive. So it's the bright colors that pop on shelves. It's really going to stick out to people when they start to look up kind of when they're at their point of consideration in shops. And that's kind of where Harry's decided to major in attraction. If we look at the consideration part of their experience, if you go D2C, they've put a couple of nice, really novel touches in there. So a checkout is exactly as you'd expect, choosing a product and whether it's in stock or not, and the entire website experience is probably exactly as you'd expect until you get to checking out, and they add a mystery gift into your basket. So this is something that is completely different that I haven't really experienced, at least the last few years, which is where they add a random part of their product set into your basket. You pay £5 for it, and they guarantee you that it's going to be worth at least £8 or something like that. So they feel like you're getting value for money, but it feels very different as an experience. And then in the pre-usage, again, the unboxing thing tends to be a bit of a trend with these pieces. Gillette comes in this kind of laminated plastic, or it feels like a kind of a quite hard to get into package. Harry's is a bit of a rustic, very attractive theme, and they've just really hammered home their attraction there. So that's I would say is Harry's as a brand example. And then finally we have Fever Tree, which is probably the one that I consume the most out of the three, almost regularly, for my sins. If we look at the tonics category before Fever Tree came in, it was primarily dominated by Schweppes. And if you were to go to a bar and ask for a gin and tonic, the two choices that you would normally have are either normal or slimline for tonic. And that is the way that the category was formed, and that was the category expectation. Fever Tree have looked at that and looked at the category expectation and thought, right, we can do something really different here. So they have really hammered home how different and attractive they are in their packaging. So Schweppes is, I think everybody can remember Schweppes as a tonic water bottle as being yellow. Fever Tree have really hammered home the patterns and the feels, and they've made that try and feel quite exotic and attractive. And now Fever Tree, during the usage part, the conversation now isn't when you speak to a bartender, would you like normal or slimline? It's, would you like Mediterranean, or would you like a different flavor? So they've really brought the kind of the usage experience up a level. And now category expectation, people were initially surprised about this, and now the expectation of the category has moved upwards slightly, and people now expect flavors of tonic waters. So now the conversation has moved on from not normal to slimline to much more. So they were the three examples I think we wanted to run you through. Really, they're three challenger brands. They've picked different drivers, and whilst they might be in the kind of mega parts, the same mega parts of the experience, it's very different interactions within that journey that they've decided to measure on.
Cool. Thanks, Danny. So I'm going to finish us off here with kind of how can you as a brand owner apply the forgettable zone of tolerance theory and the 16 driver framework to helping you kind of create an unforgettable brand. And that's really all about kind of mapping your end-to-end consumer experience against the forgettable zone of tolerance framework, and laying out kind of how your consumer journey fits amongst your competition and your category. So if anyone's keen, like, we're more than happy to share kind of this template. I think what we encourage brands to do is to first start by laying down their own journey. So where are they, in all honesty? Where are you forgettable? And again, that's okay. That's perfect. 90% of your journey should be forgettable. You know, where are you feeling that you're surprisingly memorable, and where might you, in all honesty, be disappointingly memorable? So if you lay that down, first your brand, and I'd suggest kind of being more detailed in this example here, which is just kind of dots through the journey, but what is it specifically about awareness, consideration, pre-usage, usage, post, and retirement that are the experiences people are having with your brand, and plot those against your core competition. Okay, so here we've given an example of one competitor that might be within your category. But a really important thing to do beyond just your key competitor or your key competitive set in your category is to include other brands that your target loves. So we didn't get a chance to touch too much on this today, but every person has only a limited amount of brands that they can have in their consideration set. There's an endless amount of brands out there, but there's a fixed amount that you can physically interact with in a day. And so your competition, when it comes to memorability, is not just your immediate competitive set within your category. It's actually all the other brands that your target audience is experiencing daily. And what is it about the different brands outside of your category that, you know, your target is entertaining, that they're finding memorable? And then it's about fixing your disappointingly memorable moments if you have them. So in this example, we have a disappointingly memorable moment within pre-usage that, you know, that brand owner decides to elevate into the forgettable zone of tolerance. Remember, you don't improve marginally within the forgettable zone of tolerance, so you need to break through from disappointingly memorable to the FZT. And then it's about looking at the total consumer journey across your brand, your competition, and all the other brands within the target's consideration set to say, is there a part of that consumer journey that no one's majoring on? You know, where is that open? And in this example, you know, there is an opportunity within usage that I've seen that no one in my category, no one within my target audience, you know, the brands that they love most are really majoring on that. And so how could I actually fill that white space opportunity with one of those 16 drivers? And those 16 drivers are the things that we know make up people's relationship with brands and the experience that people have with brands. It's really important to choose one of those 16 drivers to fill that white space with. And Danny and I are both here to help. Like, we wanted to leave about 5 minutes for questions. We've got 7. And you know, if you guys are happy to chat and want to know how like your brand in particular can become more unforgettable than it already is today, we're more than happy to talk through that kind of offline. And I'll just reiterate that if you're joining us, I saw Ellen from Better Nature was here. We've got /upgrades where you can get a free custom question, which is great. But if you're new to us and you want to get started, any Copy Club brand for eternity, Lottie, will get free brand awareness tracking, prompted and unprompted, and 50% off the first month. And that's there for you guys. You can visit that website. You can drop me a note. You can drop Lottie a note, whatever you're most comfortable with. So let's pause there. And would it be Lottie or Fran? Are there any, how do we want to field questions if there are any from...
I think we just like encourage people to go for it. I think guys just holler.
Don't be shy.
I'll have to pick on you if no one's going to volunteer themselves.
I've got one. So when you're mapping out the customer journey and looking at where you think you are on that what's it called, the FZT, is it something that you'd recommend kind of getting a wider team of people involved in? Because I'm just about to go through doing that myself, and it's just I'm at the stage of going like, do I get everyone involved, or is it going to be too many opinions, or should I just, because I'm new to the brand, I'm just wondering whether I should do it as being like a complete outsider's perspective. I don't know if you have any recommendations on that.
I'll take this one, MC, if that's all right, or I'll start it. I was actually in a very similar position to you with ProQuo. So I started 7 months ago as an outsider, and one of the first things I did when we came in was that we mapped this experience. So what I would suggest you do is that you do a bit of an internal one yourself to figure out where you think it is, but it's really, really important that it's a cross-functional effort. So when it was a bit theatrical at the start when I said it's my job to make sure that all of our customer interactions are largely forgettable.
That's what I would...
The team of people that do that for us at ProQuo are Michael, our head of marketing. We've got Katie, who's our head of content, who's kind of in charge of all of the outbound content you see. And then it's really me and Annie. So Annie's our head of customer success, and I'm the director of product. So between those 4 people, we look after the full end-to-end journey. And it's important that those 4 people have a joined-up view of that. And you won't really get a full understanding of all your end-to-end customer journey without those people in the room. But the other pitfall that I will just repeat again, because it happens so often, is you need to be honest with where your interactions are in that journey. But people get quite defensive over that stuff. So you need to facilitate a way so that people are honest and that they can look at that, because that's the only way that your brand will go to the next level.
Cool, thank you, that's helpful.
No probs. You're not alone, don't worry.
There's a question from Alex in the chat. How does your platform work? Is it a self-service online portal? How much support is available to users?
It's a great question. Do you want me to take that one, Danny?
Yeah, go for it. I don't want to draw everybody out of my voice.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll make this one like a quick answer as well. And we can always talk about it more. It's an online platform. So what we do is we hook your brand up with like a live wire to your audience. So we define what your category is. We define who your competitors are with you. We can do any number of your competitors. Our like base kind of core product starts with your brand plus 2 competitors plus your category. And what we do is we speak to people daily about your brand. So the platform starts with 200 people on day 1. And then every day thereafter, we get about 30 people into the platform. So what you end up getting is an establishment of where your brand stands, and then an ongoing read of how your brand's momentum is across each of the 16 drivers. So those 16 drivers that you saw, 15 minutes ago, we give your brand and we give your competition a score out of 100 on each of those 16 things. we give your brand one simple indicator of strength, which we call your ProQuo score. And the advantage of speaking to people daily about your brand is that we can basically see how your brand's experience and how people's relationship with your brand changes over time. So if you have a marketing activation launching or you have a new product dropping, we're able to tell almost instantly how that's affecting people's relationship with your brand. Equally, if a competitor does something, we can tell you whether that's working, whether that's not working. And we can also help you understand the dynamics of your category, what's important to people, where opportunity spaces are. And the support that you have is an ongoing support with the team at ProQuo. It's an online platform that is intuitive enough for you and your team to use at your leisure, but you do have the support of a customer success team. As Danny mentioned, Annie's our head, and a team behind her that immerse you onto the platform, get you to grips with it, plan your brand strategy with you, and then set you off for success to reach whatever kind of your goal is.
Cool. There is a question from Amy here, but what I'm going to say, because we've just hit 5 o'clock, is that I'm going to thank Michael and the team now. I'm sure they're happy to stay on the line and take any further questions, but just for anyone that's got to jump into another meeting, thank you so much for joining. We will send around the recording. The WhatsApp group will be live if you want to pick up on further stuff. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled for more Coffee Club and ProQuo AI talks. We've got a whole series of stuff coming up, which is kind of going to give you different topics, but like this level of really thorough, rigorous strategic thought that I just think is super helpful. So for anyone that needs to leave, feel free to scarper. Otherwise, guys, from Amy, how are they recruited into the platform?
Do you want me to say that, Michael?
Why not? Yeah.
We're going to alternate. So the long and short of it is we have access to about 80 million people around the world. And we've got that access through partnering with some specialist companies that we call panel partners, essentially. So the idea is that we would hook your brand up, and every day we would go out to that big pool of 80 million, and we would send out kind of interview requests, and we would interview them. And the way that we classify people that come in, and we put a lot of work in to make sure that people are who they say they are. And we do that by a number of questions. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen Takeshi's Castle with the floating stones or the fake doors that people have to run through to get to the end. We put a lot of fake doors at the start of our interview process so that somebody can't just say that they've used a brand before. There's lots of questions before that, like age, who you are, what industry you've worked in, what brands you're aware of, what brands you're not aware of, all those types of things. We do that first. And then of the people that have come through, we then we run our testing. I'm not going to ramble on about our like implicit response timing, but it's that system one that Michael talked about earlier. We use that system one to understand whether somebody's lying or not, frankly, because we can do that. We understand the human condition. We know what a normal reaction time is. If somebody is reacting way too consistently quickly or way too consistently slowly, we kick them out. So we have 80 million people. We tap into those 80 million people. We make them run through a proper gauntlet so that we know who we speak to are who they say they are. And then we also make sure they're subconsciously not cheating. And then they come into the platform. And that kind of gets reflected in your scores each day. So we kind of pride ourselves on having the best data quality in this industry.
I think the system 1 and 2 thing is quite new and different, because a lot of times, like, if kind of scaling brands are looking to get an understanding for how people are thinking about them, they'll often just do traditional like surveys, which are system 2. You know, it's a survey that goes out that you ask on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think about a brand? And you might get a 6. What system 1 allows you to do is to really diagnose to the nanosecond the differences in people's feelings. And we know that 95% of decisions are made in the system 1. And it's just such an important thing for brands to get on board, you know, with that. Just looking at a system 2 lens, which is a traditional survey mechanic, is not reflective of how people kind of choose the brands that they want to interact with. And so that duality of a system 1 and 2 approach, I think, is key.
Great. To be fair, Michael, I might just drop you an email because I'm just about to switch. Well, I want to just switch brand tracking providers, so it might just be worth us having a little bit more of a chat because I've probably got about 30 more questions that everyone else will think is really boring. But might be worth me just talking to you a little bit about some of the other models and so on. So I might just drop you a line if that's all right and save everyone
of course.
else. But thank you for answering that one.
No, of course.
All right, gang. I'm gonna. Does anyone? Yeah, I think from now, pick up WhatsApp. Lots of conversations can happen. If anyone wants intros to Michael and Danny, we can sort that out. Their email addresses are here. Thank you so much to all for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Phil's the only, Phil, if you got questions, you're the only non-ProQuo person lurking. I'm just talking at you.
Oh my God! Wait, am I the only what?
Oh no, I'm literally just talking to Phil.
Oh no, I was going to say thank you. That was really, really interesting. I think, well, Lottie probably knows how long I've been part of the Copy Club. It's a few years now. Been to a lot of these, and this was like really genuinely like right up the top. Found that fascinating. I guess just one question is, do you guys kind of take your own medicine? Do you use this yourselves as a challenger brand?
Yeah. Can I ask what brand you're from? Sorry? Can I ask what brand you're from?
Yeah, so it's TransferWise. It's kind of challenger money transfer.
I thought so. Can I just quickly say that it's changed my life?
Oh, yes.
We almost
of the 16 drivers did we?
No, I'll tell you, honest to God, I'll tell you, we almost use it as an example because from the States, the biggest pain is transferring money abroad. And what you guys do is differentiation on the usage experience in the emoji and animation phase of money being transferred, and then the correlation of that to how fast it moved. That is it.
I'm glad.
But yeah. Danny, why don't you take the question? Because I was too
I'm more than happy to. We absolutely take our own medicine. And I can tell you about our journey about kind of where we're at with that now. So when we first did this as a company about 7 months ago, we identified a couple of areas that we knew were probably disappointingly memorable, to be honest. The first one was our website. And Michael has really, really hammered home our value proposition, and we've done a lot of work over the last few months to make sure that our website is now very clean, crisp, and different. So that's the first piece that I actually think has probably jumped from disappointingly memorable to surprisingly memorable for the category that we're in, which is great. I think of the areas that we still want to improve on, and right now I'm of the view that it's borderline providing a slight bit of anxiety that you wouldn't want to, is our pre-usage experience, actually. So when you sign up to us, we then have to go and take all the things that you have given us in terms of like your category and who you'd like to, what segments it is that you'd like to you track and all that kind of stuff. And then we need to go and get an establishment sample of 200 people before you can start to see your score. Now, depending on how big your brand is and how big the category is and where you're targeting, that can vary in time. And what we don't do right now, I believe, is do a good enough job of incrementally communicating how far that is along. So we set up an immersion session so that somebody from the customer success team can run an exchanger. We call them, they're our customers. They can run an exchanger through the product. But actually the time elapsed between those needs to also be clearer, I think. So we need to push that from being kind of in the disappointingly memorable or anxiety inducing category up into the forgettable zone of tolerance is my view. Because actually the first time that somebody sees their data is a place that we've really majored on as a memorable moment. So that's one of the kind of delightful pieces when you first get to see exactly what people do think of you versus your competitive set. That's the thing that we know that people like. So it's just about reducing the anxiety before that. Is that? Do you think that's an honest enough answer? Do you want me to go a bit further?
No, that sounds great. Yeah, I think I might have to reach out to you as well because I've got loads more questions. But yeah, it seems very exciting, the product.
We'll take this offline. You have your private thing.
Yeah.
We also look at our people against it as well. We do our internal performance reviews against the 16 drivers because you can understand how people relate to brands just as much as how you relate to each other. And on ProQuo, there's a few people like celebrities that look at themselves through the 16 drivers. So there's a musician called Lee Brice, who's a country music star. And we're working with like Red Light Management in the US and Universal and stuff. And so you can look at Boris Johnson's ProQuo score is a 10. Like I can tell you that, and Netflix is an 80. So you can see a wide range of scores in the platform, but it's important to know that, yeah, it's something that is meant to be a framework that's really accessible and that you can really kind of simplify a complicated world of brand management through.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, gang.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. That was really fun. I hope we didn't
was
talk
fun.
too much.
Webinars are good, aren't they, Danny? They're quite
Yeah,
fun.
actually. They're not too bad.
Oh, all right, all. We'll
Thank
speak
you.
soon.
Bye.
Thanks so much,
guys.
guys.